So to clear up exactly what's going on and how your textbook is progressing in Chapter 8 to teach you the rules, let's look here quickly at how you should understand these schemas. This is from 8.1, so we're talking about implicational rules, which means that if you're given something, you can imply something else. So given that we have if P then Q and P, that implies that Q is also true. Notice that this doesn't go both directions. We can't have Q and then imply either of these premises. So this just goes one direction. Some of the rules you'll learn in later sections of Chapter 8 are equivalence rules, which means as long as you have one side or the other, you could infer the opposite side. But back to this schema here. As you remember from Chapter 7, the discussion of well-formed formula, these letters are going to stand as placeholders for any well-formed formula. Now, a well-formed formula could just be a single letter. It could be the letter W, which would stand for, of course, a sentence and an argument. However, you also know that a well-formed formula could be W and R. And if that were the case, then that would stand in here for P. So this schema is telling us is that anything that has this form that appears in a premise, and if we have something with this form, which should be identical to the antecedent here, we can conclude the consequent. So it doesn't have to be a single letter the way this is demonstrating. This would be an indication of the rule. If we had W and R, that now could stand as a placeholder for P, right? So then maybe T or D, could stand as a place, or could be substituted in for Q. So now to use this schema over here, we would have this sentence. If we had as a premise, say, if W and R, then T or D, and we had as premise 2 W and R. Say now when we formalize this argument, it said that the conclusion was T or D, we could make this move to line 3, T or D from 1 and 2 via modus ponens. So see that the W and R here satisfies the P, the T or D satisfies the Q. Since we have W and R occurring in a separate premise, we can now take these two lines and conclude Q. Now if this were a more elaborate argument, we would probably use this then in another line with another rule and maybe additional premises. But that's how these are working. So they don't have to be single letters. These are just formalizations of each rule, and they could be considerably more complex than anything that you're seeing here. But these are the forms, and as long as this form occurs within a larger argument, you can use that rule and know that this is true. If you ever doubt whether one of these rules actually works, just take the premises and the conclusion and do a truth table and see if it's valid. See if truth is guaranteed to go from the premise to the conclusion via the truth table method, just to demonstrate that the rules work. Of course, we could come up with a really long list of rules for almost any move you can imagine, but that would be a lot of things to remember. And another option is to have very few rules, but then have very long proofs, because you have to identify every single step along the way. What the textbook tries to do is draw a balance between the two, and just gives you a moderate amount of rules to try to make for relatively short proofs. But in logic, we are going to be very rigorous. We're not going to make any moves that we can't demonstrate to be true. We're not going to make any assumptions if we can avoid it. We want to show in a very rigorous way that if we're given certain facts, that certain conclusions can be drawn, and we can demonstrate every step along the way that there's no room for error. So I hope this has been helpful for you understanding Chapter 8. As usual, please post any questions. If you have a question with regard to a specific problem in the exercises, post all those on the message board so we can treat it sort of like a class discussion where everybody can hear the question, everybody can hear the answer, and you can chime in if you need further clarification or something like that. All right, I hope you're having a great week, and we'll see you online.